Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kelsey. I'm Kelsey Yogi here on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And today we are not getting on our hands, but we are getting onto our feet. So I've had quite a few comments talking about my squat. I got a pretty good squat. I think some of it I was just probably blessed with, but the other part of it, I do work quite a bit on my mobility. So I'm going to give you the tips and tricks that I use to be able to get into a deeper yogi squat. So I will say this, from all the videos that I have watched online from places like Squat University and heels over toes and people that really help you develop great squats and great hips, they talk about full range of motion. So while I love Ashtanga, these kinds of squats where we just, half-ass it a little bit, they aren't cutting it as far as you getting into a deep squat where you're getting full flexion through the hip, full flexion through the ankles, and then the exact opposite. We want full extension at times. That way we are taking advantage of our joints to the utmost without exploiting them. So I wrote down a couple of things, and let's first talk about the ankles. So I know specifically for a lot of people in yoga, getting the heels down is a struggle. And if it's not going to happen for you, I don't want you to beat yourself up because it literally can be the bone structure of your ankle, and there's nothing you can do about that. But if it's tension, if it's tightness, that is something that we can work towards. So working on getting those heels to the ground. If in the beginning it's really hard for you and you just are not able to do it, I want you to know that there's always options. Take your mat, roll it up, give yourself a couple of layers, get those heels up. That way you have support while you're working these postures, and over time you can soften and relax into them, because when something really hurts and you start holding that tension, you're gonna have a really hard time letting your body know that this is a safe space. So use that rolled up mat or a towel, something similar to that, that will help you to get a little bit of ease just through your mind and through the ankles to help you to let go. Okay, one of the other things that I do a lot is I work on the strength of my ankles. I do quite frequently heel raises because I tend to have a weak left ankle. I like to lift my arch and roll to the outer edge. And it's just something that I've always done. I have pictures of me as a child standing in this supination, which is terrible for your ankles. And over time, I catch myself doing it when I don't mean to. I just start lifting my arches. And so I like to keep strength through that whole ankle by doing the heel raises. And sometimes I do them weighted, just nice through center, maybe 10, 15, 25. I also do them with toes out, kind of like that ballet plie or whatever. I don't do ballet. And then I also do them with toes in. And work up to doing 25 in each position, because I don't know if you're anything like me, you do a lot of heel raises. You might feel okay today, and then tomorrow you're going to be praying to all the leg gods to help you to be able to walk, because your calves are going to be tight. So if you're like me, make sure that you do your forward folds, stretch out those calves when you're done, really get length in them after you've worked them so hard. Okay, so not only do I work on the heel raises, but I also do toe raises, and I got that from the heels over toe guy. He says that one of the best way to protect your knees is to strengthen the muscles at the fronts of your shins, the tibial somethings. I'm not an expert, but I work the fronts of my shins by leaning against the wall and just lifting my toes. And this looks like a pretty easy drill, but I will tell you, get about 10, 15, 20 of them in, and they're not easy at all. You will definitely be feeling the fronts of your shins burning. So nice way again to strengthen up the ankles. And once you've gotten some good blood flowing through the ankle, you may find coming back to work mobility afterwards a little bit easier. So it's nice to come into the squat first, do those little drills, then come back and see where you're at. So let's work a little bit on the flexibility of the ankle. Some of my favorite ways to do it is just sitting in hero's pose. In the beginning, to tuck the toes and sit on the heels, perfect. And you can really kind of work with this too. I'm crawling my knees away. It's forcing me to get a little bit more stretch through the arches of the feet, also through the toes, and even through the ankles a little bit. So staying in this one, 20, 30 seconds, even up to a minute. And then as you're able to get a little bit more availability through the feet, maybe you can point the toes back and sit on the heels. And when that comes more manageable, maybe even sitting between the feet. And this isn't as much about the ankles, although you are stretching out the tops of the feet and the toes this way. This is great internal hip rotation. So it's really good for the hips as well as for the ankles. So make sure that you are sitting in your hero's pose. I've heard a lot of chiropractors and pediatricians tell me like, oh, never let your kids sit between their heels. I don't really exactly know what their reasoning is for that, and I'm not telling you not to listen to your doctor by all means. Listen to what they say to do, but I have just found when I backed away from hero's pose, I started having some major knee issues. I was only working that external hip rotation, you know, like butterfly, opening the legs, and I wasn't drawing the legs in for that internal rotation, and I ended up having some major issues. So like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, work full range of motion. So if you're going to work external hip rotation, you gotta work that internal hip rotation as well. So anyway, hanging out in your Virasana, you can even use a block if you need a little bit more support. I know my mom, who started doing yoga later in her life, needed to use a block at first, and she was pretty thrilled when she went down to her heels, and now she's even a little bit lower than that. It can take time. Be patient with your practice. Just show up a little bit for it every day. So if that's one of those areas that's really hard for you, the ankle mobility, just give it 2-3 minutes every day at the end of your practice, or even if you're sitting and watching a movie with your kids or taking some notes on something, sit in your hero's pose. Use your yoga in your normal everyday life. When we start incorporating these kinds of postures just into our lives, they're going to be a lot easier when we want to do them on our mats. And they won't always be hard. They do get better. Okay, so one of the other things that I do for my ankle mobility, besides just sitting in hero's pose, all the variations of, is I just do my lunges. So coming into a lunge, to me, a lot of people in yoga will say, don't let your knees go past your toes, but that's not something I personally practice. I think the knees go over the toes all the time. And like I said, I really like full range of motion. And when you're climbing stairs, when you're going downstairs, when you're climbing up the ladder or going, I climb up on my countertops to get things in high cupboards, my knees go over my toes all the time. And that really works well for me. Now, if you have major pain doing that, that's obviously different and you need to talk to your doctor about that. But if you're not having major issues with that, why would you not let your knees go past your toes? You want to have that knee joint completely closed. We want to have lots of flexion through the ankle. I say do what feels good and push to your edge. So work that ankle mobility by making sure that the heel stays down. Once the heel raises up, we're obviously not working the ankle anymore. So I'm going to stay in this low lunge. I want my entire foot to be nice and flat, and I'm going to start to even use my upper body to drive my knee farther forward. Now what I'm looking for is, I'm getting a really good hip flexor stretch on that right side, but the more that I drive my knee past my toe, the more I'm feeling this stretch throughout my ankle. Now the heel starts to raise, you got to back up and you got to stay right where you're at. And I want you to really focus on planting the arch and planting the heel, like sending the energy down in that area. And then hang out here, And this is something you could even add a little bit of weight to. So, start little, 10 by 10 pounds, maybe a lot more for some of you guys, 20 pounds, and just put a little extra weight on the front of that leg, drive the knee forward and stretch out that ankle, get that deep flexion. We don't get a whole lot of that. At least not enough, not if you're wanting a really deep, comfy squat. And of course, always make sure that you're working both sides. And you may notice, like, wow, that ankle wasn't too bad. This ankle really gives me a little bit of trouble. I didn't realize that my ankle was so tight on this side. My heel doesn't want to drop down at all. Then you got to spend a little bit extra time on that second side. Make sure that that knee joint is closing completely, because obviously we can come into full extension with the leg, with the knee, because we walk. We straighten out the leg all the time. This really deep flexion, this closing of the knee joint, this is important too. So as you see, keeping that heel down. If in the beginning it doesn't happen and you gotta roll up your mat or put a towel under there, that's okay. But still driving the heel down, closing that ankle joint. I'm really almost gripping with all 5 of my toes here, and I'm just sending that leg forward, which, like I said, nice hip flexor at the same time, so this is pulling double duty. Alrighty, okay, so that's all I'm gonna do for now with the ankles, although there's another, I might mention one more, just that old runner stretch where you use the wall, toes up, heels down, and lean into it. It is a little bit of an ankle stretch as well, more for the hamstrings and the calves, but I do like doing that as well, especially after I've done all those heel raises. So make sure that you are spending time stretching out your ankles. I know that's not something that people think about, but it is something you need to do if you want to be really comfy all the way next to the floor. And I'm telling you, as we get older, this position becomes crucial. You need to be able to get all the way up and get all the way back down and feel pretty good in those positions. All right, so I mentioned before, also working on the hips, obviously, right? We're squatting really, really low. Our hips need to be very mobile. I think mobility, flexibility are both important, but we want hips that will move, right? So not only do they need to be strong, they need to be functioning and moving. All right, so one of my postures that I use a lot just to warm up, because for my warm-ups, I don't really like to stretch per se, but I like to get the joints moving. Stretching is great after a hard workout. Mobility is best before. So just a little gentle movement. These are called 90-90s. As you can see, you get a 90-degree angle with both legs. And I just rotate from one side to the next, kind of keeping the ankles flexed, the knees. I'm looking to keep that 90-degree angle. Now, if this is too hard without the hands, by all means, use the hands. Help yourself get from side to side. You may feel some tension through the hips. Tension's okay. I would not back away from tension. Instead, lean into it a little bit. Let that friction happen and breathe in, soften where you can. Like I mentioned earlier, if you don't feel safe in a space, if you feel frustrated or scared or like, oh my God, this is awful, then you're telling your brain, this isn't okay, and I don't care how hard you push, I'm not going to settle into that space. So instead, relax your shoulders, soften your jaw and your tongue, and just do your moves as best you can while staying calm and patient with the body. So after you've done these 90-90s 10, 12, 20 times, whatever you like doing, then let's see if we can come into them without using the hands. And in the beginning you may, but as you move through these and you do a little bit every day, then you can start to get that rotation without using the hands at all. And straightening it out, get the other side. I mean, obviously we have to move the body a little bit to create space, but no big deal. Healthy hips like to move. The body likes to help out. That's what it wants to do. But it can come into the full expression, so I'm happy with that, even with a little bit of swaying in the upper body. All right, so once you've gotten that 90-90 down and you're feeling pretty good there, I'm gonna turn so you can see me. I'm gonna work on even more so strengthening the glutes, the hips, the adductors, the abductors, because I wanna make sure that the groin and the glutes are healthy enough to come into deep squats. So once I'm in that 90-90, kind of leaning forward a little bit, see if you can start lifting that back ankle. It's harder than you would think that it is, so 10, 12 times, 3 sets maybe. And you can help too if you need to give it a little bit of help, because sometimes when you haven't moved in a specific direction, either ever before or not very much, the body doesn't even know what to do. Maybe it has the strength or the flexibility, but it doesn't even know what you're asking of it. So help the body move a little bit, then it may get easier. Obviously you want to do both sides. And you may find that, I'm right-legged, that is my more dominant leg, so this one not only is my more mobile hip, but it's obviously my stronger hip as well. And once you get really good at this, you could add some ankle weights, maybe just 1 or 2 pounds. You don't need very much. I would not recommend doing it on a cement floor like I am, because I'm smacking my ankle bone on the cement a little bit. Probably would be better to be right on the mat. But there, so you got an idea of moving through those 90-90s, coming into them with no hands, and then also lifting the ankle without using the hands to get the strength of the abductors and the adductors. And so another one that we can do to help work a similar line is to work our butterfly pose, so Baddha Konasana. And one way that I really like to do it, not only to stretch out through the hips, is to add a block between my feet. Works better if you're right up against the wall. Getting a little bit extra stretch. I kind of have to keep my hands behind me because I don't have the wall directly behind me. My knees obviously are not going to come down because this is a much bigger opening for the hips. This is a nice one to open the hips, and also so is pigeon pose. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with pigeon pose. Maybe I'll remember to show you at the end of the video if you're not. Okay, so there's my butterfly with a block. You could also use a water bottle or 2 or even just 1 thing as a toilet paper. That would work as well. And then something else you can do for your butterfly is to just open and close slowly. I don't like flapping, it's really not my favorite. But opening and closing in butterfly with just using the strength of the hips. So adduction, abduction, adduction, abduction. And so one of the nice things about doing this with no hands is it creates active flexibility, not passive flexibility. Passive flexibility, I'm forcing the flexibility on my body. It has no choice. But with active flexibility, I'm using the strength of my own muscles to take me into full range of motion. So make sure though, when you are working in your butterfly pose, that the outer edges of your feet stay together, so the pinky toe edge, the heels, and it's just the big toes and the arches of the feet that are opening up. And this is really nice. When you see the bottoms of your feet open up like this, you know you're getting that full external hip rotation. And we're gonna need that external hip rotation when we go into a very deep yogi squat. All right, so once you've held that for a little while, then let's go back and see how that yogi squat is doing. Maybe you've been there a million times and you can no-hand it. Maybe you're not quite there yet, but a couple things to think about when you are in your yogi squat or even a regular weightlifting squat and you're really deep. Make sure that your knees are trekking with your toes. So I don't want to have a toe that's facing out to the side and a knee that's dropping in. It means we got to work something. We're losing some strength somewhere in the leg, and I'm not a professional there, so just be very aware that the knee and the toes have to face in the same direction. And for a yoga squat, the toes and the knees face out, and the ankles, or the heels, excuse me, come in. Now again, if you're really uncomfortable there, roll up your mat and put it under your heels. So that's easy to do. It doesn't take you very long in class. You don't have to not do it because, you know, she's like, oh, she just called out yogi squat. I don't have time. Yes, you do it. It took me 2 seconds to roll my mat up and put it underneath me. No big deal. Because I want you to settle into it. The more you settle in, the quicker your brain's gonna tell your body, this is okay, we can do this. Or stick the block under there, and settle in. And then start running that scan. Where am I holding the tension? I can tell you right now, if I'm noticing any more tension, it's on my right inner groin. So that's probably an area that is maybe a little bit weak, so it's trying so hard to constantly correct. And I have been working that area, but what I'm saying for you is get into this position, get the mind quiet, and notice what you notice. So, you know what? It's my ankles. My ankles just are so tight, they don't want to drop down. All right, well then we got to work on getting those knees past the toes, lean in close to a wall. That way you can really push that flexibility of the ankle as much as possible. Make sure that you're doing your 90-90s, that you're doing your pigeon pose. Let me show you that real quick. So when you come into pigeon pose, you can come from downward facing dog. Otherwise, just, you know, hands down. If I'm working on my right side, which I am, then the right ankle goes towards the left wrist and the right knee goes towards the right wrist. I want to think about having my shin, which today, right now, is my right shin, parallel with the front of my mat. So a lot of people are like, you don't have to do that. No, you don't have to. But I'll tell you, when I pull the knee all the way closed like this and the ankle comes close to my body, it puts a lot of strain on my inner knee, and I'm not feeling any hip opening. I'm not feeling any hip stretch. So I had a teacher that really pushed me and encouraged me, keep your shin parallel to the front of your mat, flex your ankle. And if you're having pain on the knee, which happens a lot, no big deal, roll to your glute, roll to your hip. Take the weight out of it so that you're not putting the pressure on the knee. And look for the friction on that outer edge of the hip. So I'm showing on my left. You're gonna feel the friction on the outer hip, but obviously on the side that you're doing. And then to settle in a little bit, you know, use your block, get comfortable, hang out with the intensity, hang out with that friction, open those hips up, obviously work both sides. And with time and practice, Virasana, butterfly pose, hero's pose, pigeon pose, working that ankle mobility, ankle flexibility, ankle strength, your glutes, your yogi squat will come along. So just hang out there, show up again and again, because if we only come at it, you know, that one time a month that the yoga teacher calls it out, or when you have to do it in the gym for whatever reason, it's not part of your normal life, part of your daily practice. It's going to be a struggle and it's going to be really uncomfortable, and you're going to tense up and stay away from it. So instead, you know, I'm here when I start videos, or I'm here in that hero's pose. If something's really difficult for you, it's probably a posture that you need, right? So it's one of those things where yoga begins when we get really uncomfortable in the posture. So I guess you know which ones are calling out for you. I know I need to hang out in my pigeon pose more often. We all gotta put in the work. Anyways, I hope that helped. Maybe you just got 1 or 2 tips that made your yogi squat a little bit more doable. If you have any questions or comments, please leave it down below in the comments section. Let me know what you want to see in the next videos. Follow me on TikTok, it's a little bit more fun. Instagram, I tend to show what I do in my own practice. Check me out over there. Drink your water, have an amazing day, take care, and namaste.